The Last Stand. In the shadow of Earth's defeat, Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Research Station Omega, watching the distant flashes of combat between Nexian and Valorian warships. The battle for control of this seemingly insignificant system had raged for 3 days, neither alien empire aware of the true prize hidden on the unremarkable moon below. "Status report," she asked, not turning from the reinforced viewport. The holographic display reflected off the transparent surface, overlaying tactical data across the cosmic light show. "The gene locks are holding, Doctor," replied Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, his fingers dancing across the biolab's control interface. "The archaea strain remains stable, and the symbiotic integration is proceeding exactly as planned. They'll never be able to reverse engineer it." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. After humanity's devastating losses in the War of Ascension, most believed their species would fade into obscurity, reduced to a minor client race of whichever empire proved victorious. The Nexians, with their crystalline technology and hive-mind military structure, had seemed unstoppable. The Valorians, masters of biological engineering and psychic warfare, had been equally relentless. But humanity had one advantage neither empire understood: desperation bred innovation. "Begin final sequence," Sarah commanded, turning to face the assembled team of Earth's last free scientists. Initiative Garden is now active. The laboratories beneath the station's surface hummed with activity as the culmination of 15 years of research entered its final phase. In sealed chambers, rows upon rows of seemingly innocent plants swayed in artificial breeze, their iridescent leaves shimmering with subtle bioluminescence. To any observer, they appeared to be merely decorative flora, perhaps a luxury good to trade with the empire that eventually claimed this system. The Nexians would see the plants' crystalline structural similarities as aesthetically pleasing. The Valorians would be drawn to their subtle psychic resonance. Neither would recognize them as weapons until it was far too late. "Dr. Chen," called out Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the genetics lab, "the final batches are ready for dispersal. The dormancy triggers are encoded and locked. Timer sequences are set for generational activation." Sarah nodded, remembering the day the project was conceived. In humanity's darkest hour, when their fleets lay in ruins and their colonies burned, a small group of xenobotanists had made a revolutionary discovery. Both the Nexians and Valorians shared a peculiar weakness. Their civilizations were built on rigid order, predictable patterns, and absolute control. "Package the samples for transport," she ordered. "Make them beautiful. Make them irresistible. And most importantly, make them look completely harmless." The plants, designated Project Lotus, were humanity's ultimate Trojan horse. Their genetic code contained sequences that would remain dormant for generations, spreading harmlessly through both empires as decorative status symbols. But encoded within each cell was a carefully orchestrated sequence of changes that would trigger precisely when both empires had become completely dependent on them. As Sarah watched her team make the final preparations, a priority alert flashed across her neural interface. The Valorian fleet had broken through the Nexian line. Soon, they would discover the research station. "Initiate Protocol Sunset," she commanded. Throughout the facility, data cores began systematically wiping themselves. The team had already evacuated most of the civilian staff through the quantum tunnels, leaving only the essential personnel to complete their work. "Ma'am," Rodriguez called out, "the first shipments are away. Automated merchants have been programmed with full coverage of both empires' trade routes. Distribution will begin within the month." Sarah walked to the central control platform, entering her final authorization codes. Around her, the remaining scientists did the same, each adding their genetic keys to the sequence that would ensure their creation could never be undone or controlled by their oppressors. "Humanity wasn't defeated," she said softly, watching the confirmation signals from the automated transport ships. "We just needed time to plant the seeds of their destruction." The Valorian warships were closing in now, their biological vessels casting strange shadows across the station's hull. Soon, they would claim their prize, never knowing they were taking possession of their own downfall. "Clear the facility," Sarah ordered. "Activate the memory scramblers. When they get here, all they'll find is an abandoned research station working on luxury goods." She allowed herself a final look at their creation, the culmination of human ingenuity and patience. Let them think they've won. In time, they'll learn that humanity's greatest weapon was never our warships or our armies. As the team made their way to the evacuation pods, Sarah input the final command sequence. Throughout the station, hidden systems activated, carefully crafting the illusion of an abandoned civilian research facility. By the time the Valorians breached the airlocks, they would find exactly what they expected. Another conquered human outpost, nothing more than a footnote in their empire's expansion. But in the sealed botanical chambers below, humanity's true victory was already beginning, one innocent flower at a time. The last escape pod ejected silently into space, just as the first Valorian boarding craft attached to the station's hull. Inside, Sarah Chen clutched a single seed pod, its surface gleaming with promise in the starlight. The real war for humanity's survival wasn't ending today, it was just beginning. Seeds of change. High Counselor Sarith of the Valorian Empire stood in his private arboretum aboard the capital ship, Eternal Bloom, admiring his latest acquisition. The human-engineered plant, which his scientists had designated Stella Aurora, pulsed with a gentle bioluminescence that seemed to resonate with his species' natural psychic sensitivity. Its crystalline-like stem structure caught and reflected light in ways that reminded him of Nexian architecture, yet it possessed an organic fluidity that spoke to Valorian aesthetic sensibilities. "Remarkable," he murmured, watching the flower's petals shift through subtle hues of blue and violet. "To think such beauty came from a defeated race." The human research station yielded unexpected treasures. "Excellency," reported Chief Botanist Valari, her tendrils rippling with professional excitement. "The genetic architecture is extraordinary, clearly artificial, yet seamlessly integrated. They were working on luxury goods, status symbols for trade." "How fitting," Sarith replied, "that their final legacy should be something so decorative." He reached out with his psychic senses, feeling the plant's subtle resonance. It produced a sensation of calm, of rightness, that made him want to acquire more specimens immediately. Across the galaxy, in the crystalline corridors of the Nexian Collective's central hub, similar scenes were playing out. Hive Commander Nucleus 7 observed the same species of flower through compound eyes, its neural network processing the unusual properties of this new discovery. Analysis indicates optimal placement in all major administrative centers. The Nexian reported to its cluster. "The specimens show remarkable compatibility with our crystalline architecture. Recommendation: immediate wide-scale cultivation." Neither empire realized they were executing the exact distribution pattern that Dr. Sarah Chen and her team had predicted. The plant's dual-natured appeal, crystalline elements for the Nexians, psychic resonance for the Valorians, had been carefully engineered to ensure rapid adoption by both civilizations. Within months, Stella Aurora specimens appeared in every major government facility, corporate headquarters, and wealthy private residence across both empires. The plants became status symbols, their presence indicating sophistication and success. Trading networks developed, with specially equipped ships ensuring optimal conditions for transport. On a distant mining world, Sarah Chen, now working under the alias Marina Santos, monitored the spread through carefully placed sensors. The automated merchant vessels they'd launched continued their programmed routes, ensuring a steady supply to meet the growing demand. Phase 1 completion at 87%, reported her quantum-encrypted AI assistant. Plant distribution has exceeded initial projections by 12%. Sarah reviewed the data streams showing the flower's integration into both societies. The Valorians had begun incorporating them into their sacred ceremonies, drawn to the subtle psychic harmonies that seemed to enhance their natural abilities. The Nexians had developed elaborate crystalline gardens where the plant's architecture complemented their own geometric designs. "Have they detected any of the dormant sequences?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The gene locks her team had designed were holding perfectly. "Negative," the AI confirmed. "Both Empire's analysis shows only the surface characteristics we intended them to find. The Valorians are particularly intrigued by the psychic resonance patterns, but their investigations haven't penetrated beyond the first layer of genetic coding." Sarah allowed herself a moment of pride in her team's work. The plants weren't just spreading. They were being actively cultivated and protected by the very empires they were designed to undermine. Each new generation of flowers contained the same dormant sequences, waiting for the precise conditions that would trigger their true purpose. In the Valorian capital, High Counselor Xareth had just signed an executive order making Stella Aurora cultivation a protected industry. The Nexian Collective had already designated specific agricultural worlds for mass production. Both empires believed they were securing valuable economic and cultural assets. Neither suspected that each plant was a tiny quantum receiver, gathering data, analyzing patterns, and waiting for the signal to begin Phase 2. The flower's psychic resonance was slowly, imperceptibly altering the Valorians' cognitive patterns. The crystalline structures were subtly influencing Nexian communication networks. Sarah closed the monitoring station and prepared for her next cover placement. As she packed her few belongings, she picked up a small holo image. The original research team on Station Omega. "The seeds are planted," she whispered to their frozen faces. "Now we wait for them to bloom." In the space lanes between Empire territories, more automated merchants continued their routes, spreading humanity's revenge one beautiful, innocent flower at a time. The war that everyone thought was over had never really ended. It had simply gone underground, biding its time in gardens and arboretums across the galaxy. The markets rise. 5 years after the introduction of Stella Aurora, the galactic economy had transformed beyond recognition. What had begun as a luxury commodity had evolved into the backbone of both empires' financial systems. In the crystalline spires of the Nexian Central Exchange, market indicators pulsed with unprecedented activity. Nucleus 7, now promoted to Economic Oversight Cluster, processed the latest data streams with growing concern. "Market volatility exceeds acceptable parameters," it reported to the collective. "Stella Aurora futures now represent 60% of total trading volume. Traditional industrial indices showing marked decline. The Nexian civilization, once built on rigid efficiency and mathematical precision, had become obsessed with the beauty and perceived value of the human-engineered flowers. Their crystalline architecture, once purely functional, now incorporated elaborate growing chambers. Production quotas were measured not in industrial output, but in successful bloom cycles. Meanwhile, in the Valorian High Council chamber, an emergency session was in progress. High Counselor Xareth, his position now dependent on his control of major growing operations, faced angry demands from planetary governors. "The shortage in the Outer Rim colonies is causing civil unrest," declared Governor Melira, her psychic projection crackling with anxiety. "Workers are demanding payment in Aurora bowls rather than imperial credits. Traditional banking systems are becoming obsolete. The flowers enhance our psychic abilities," another counselor argued. "They've become essential to our spiritual practices, our medical treatments, our very way of life. We cannot simply reduce dependency." Sarah Chen, now operating under her third alias as a mid-level trade analyst, sat in her hidden monitoring station reviewing the latest data. The quantum receivers embedded in each plant had been collecting and transmitting information for years, building a complete picture of both empires' vulnerabilities. Phase 2 completion at 93%, her AI reported. Economic integration has exceeded all projected models. Both empires now show critical dependency levels. The plants had done more than just infiltrate their economies. They had fundamentally altered how both civilizations functioned. The Valorians' psychic sensitivity to the flowers had led to a society-wide addiction to their effects. The Nexians' attempt to optimize cultivation had transformed their once efficient industrial base into a speculation-driven market economy. But beneath the surface, the true changes were even more profound. The flowers' subtle influence had been slowly altering neural patterns and communication networks. The Valorians' once unified psychic consensus was fragmenting into competing interest groups. The Nexians' hive mind efficiency was giving way to individualistic trading behavior. Begin preparations for Phase 3, Sarah commanded, sending encrypted instructions to dormant cells of human agents scattered throughout both empires. The systems are sufficiently destabilized. In her private garden aboard the Eternal Bloom, Valari, now chief economic advisor, noticed something troubling about her prized specimens. The latest generation of blooms seemed slightly different, subtle variations in color, minimal changes in psychic resonance. When she tried to access the genetic codes to investigate, she found them even more impenetrable than before. Among the Nexians, similar anomalies were appearing. Communication networks that had been enhanced by the flower's crystalline properties began experiencing mysterious fluctuations. The changes were too small to raise immediate alarm, but they were spreading, preparing for the moment when all the carefully laid groundwork would come to fruition. Sarah opened a secure channel to the Hidden Human Resistance Council. "The foundation is set," she reported. "Both empires have restructured their entire societies around our creation. Their military budgets have been diverted to cultivation and research. Their populations are dependent on the flower's effects. They've forgotten that these plants were created by the very species they thought they'd defeated." In the depths of space, automated cultivation ships continued their programmed routes, their holds full of seemingly innocent flowers. Each bloom was a tiny seed of chaos, planted in the heart of the Empire's once ordered societies. The crystalline spires of Nexian cities now pulsed with the light of vast indoor gardens. Valorian ceremonies had become completely dependent on the flower's psychic resonance. They thought they were creating a new economic foundation. Sarah mused, watching the data streams that showed the growing instability in both empires' core systems. Instead, they built their entire civilization on a time bomb of our design. As she prepared the final activation codes, Sarah remembered the fall of Earth, the burning of human colonies. The empires had thought humanity broken, reduced to nothing more than creators of beautiful, harmless flowers. They were about to learn how wrong they'd been. In gardens across two empires, the next generation of Stella Aurora began to bloom, their petals opening to reveal the beginning of humanity's true revenge. Breaking point. The first signs of collapse appeared in the furthest reaches of Valorian space. On agricultural worlds dedicated to Stella Aurora cultivation, entire fields of flowers began exhibiting unexpected mutations. The changes were subtle at first, slightly altered psychic resonance patterns, minimal variations in crystalline structure. Valari stood in her laboratory aboard the Eternal Bloom, her tendrils writhing in distress as she examined the latest reports. "Impossible," she whispered, reviewing genetic sequences that seemed to shift before her eyes. "The base code is evolving." The gene locks that had frustrated Imperial scientists for years were finally revealing their true purpose. Each generation of flowers had carried dormant instructions, waiting for precisely this moment to activate. The plants weren't just changing, they were transforming according to a masterfully orchestrated plan. In Nexian space, the crisis manifested differently. The crystalline networks that formed the backbone of their hive-mind communication began experiencing cascading failures. Nucleus 7 detected the first anomalies in their primary data conduits. "Critical error in collective synchronization," it reported, its unified consciousness fragmenting as the enhanced neural pathways created by the flowers began to degrade, unable to maintain consensus protocols. Sarah Chen, now operating from a hidden base deep in former human territory, watched the chaos unfold across her monitoring screens. "Initiate final phase," she commanded, sending the activation signal through the quantum network hidden within every flower. The results were devastating. In Valorian space, the flower's psychic resonance suddenly shifted frequency, creating a debilitating feedback loop in the Empire's enhanced abilities. Their carefully cultivated diplomatic and military coordination began to break down as leaders found themselves unable to maintain their traditional psychic connections. The humans, High Counselor Sareth realized, too late, as he watched his empire's communication networks collapse. They didn't just create a trade good. They engineered a weapon that we willingly planted in the heart of every critical facility we own. The Nexian response was equally panicked. Their hybrid crystalline organic computer networks, optimized to work in harmony with the flower's structure, began experiencing systematic failures. Military commands became garbled, economic systems crashed, and for the first time in their history, the hive mind began to fragment into isolated clusters. Analysis indicates deliberate sabotage patterns. Nucleus 7 reported to its rapidly disintegrating collective. The genetic sequences were designed to target our core systems once integration reached critical mass. Sarah accessed the secured archives, reviewing the original project files from Research Station Omega. The plants had been engineered not just to infiltrate and addict, but to fundamentally alter the biological and technological foundations of both empires. Each flower was a tiny computer, executing its programmed sequence with perfect precision. "Send word to the resistance cells," she ordered. "It's time to reveal ourselves." Across both empires, sleeper agents who had hidden among civilian populations for years began emerging. They were scientists, traders, and cultural advisors who had helped promote the flower's adoption. Now they stepped forward to deliver humanity's message. In the Valorian High Council chamber, as leaders struggled with their failing psychic networks, a hidden quantum projector activated. Dr. Sarah Chen's image appeared before them, her expression stern but satisfied. "You thought you had conquered humanity," she announced, her words broadcasting simultaneously across every world where the flowers bloomed. "You saw us as nothing more than a defeated race, useful only for creating your luxuries. But we knew something you didn't. The greatest victories don't come from brute force or overwhelming numbers. They come from patience, from understanding your enemy's nature, and from letting them defeat themselves." The Nexian collective received the same message, their fragmenting consciousness forced to process the truth of their situation. The flowers that had seemed to perfect their society had instead been carefully dismantling it from within. "Your empires aren't just dependent on our creation," Sarah continued. "They've been redesigned by it. Your communication systems, your economic networks, your very biology. All of it has been slowly transformed according to our design. The more you try to optimize and enhance your connection to these plants, the more deeply you embedded our weapon into your civilization's DNA. In gardens and agricultural worlds across both empires, the flowers continued their programmed evolution. Each bloom was now a terminal in humanity's vast organic computer network, executing the final stages of a plan decades in the making. Military vessels, their systems compromised by integration with the flower's crystalline structures, found themselves unable to maintain basic functions. The Valorian Psychic Command Network, enhanced and then addicted to the flower's resonance, collapsed into chaos as the frequencies shifted beyond their ability to control. Sarah closed the transmission, watching as the carefully constructed house of cards began to fall. "They thought they were creating gardens," she said to her team. "Instead, they were cultivating their own destruction. The war that everyone thought had ended years ago was finally reaching its true conclusion, and humanity's revenge was blooming in every corner of their enemies' empires." Empires fall. The collapse of two galactic empires didn't come with massive space battles or heroic last stands. Instead, it came with the quiet opening of billions of flowers, each executing its part in humanity's grand design. In the Nexian central core, Nucleus 7 struggled to maintain basic functions as the collective consciousness that had guided their civilization for millennia shattered into countless individual minds. The crystalline networks, now fully transformed by years of integration with Stella Aurora, began executing their final protocols. Unable to maintain collective cohesion, it broadcasted, its once unified voice fragmenting into desperate individual thoughts. Primary systems compromised. Secondary systems compromised. Emergency protocols ineffective. The Valorian response proved equally futile. High Counselor Sareth stood in his private chambers, watching as the empire he had helped build crumbled around him. The psychic networks that had bound their civilization together were being systematically dismantled by the very flowers they had come to depend on. How? He demanded, facing the hologram of Sarah Chen that now appeared in every major government facility across both empires. How did you plan this so perfectly? Sarah's image smiled, but there was no mockery in her expression. Only the satisfaction of a scientist seeing a complex experiment reach its predicted conclusion. We studied you both for years before the war. We knew the Nexians couldn't resist the perfect crystalline structure of our creation. We knew the Valorians would be drawn to its psychic resonance. But most importantly, we knew that both your empires were built on absolute control that you would eventually surrender to something that promised to make that control even more perfect. Across vast stretches of space, the automated cultivation ships that had seemed so harmless revealed their true nature. Each vessel contained quantum computers that had been gathering data for years, analyzing patterns, and waiting for this moment. Now they activated, becoming command centers for humanity's hidden resistance. Your greatest weakness, Sarah continued, her words echoing through failing communication networks, was your inability to understand humanity's greatest strength. You saw our diversity as chaos, our individualism as weakness. You never understood that our seeming disorder was actually adaptability. While you built empires on rigid order, we learned to thrive in uncertainty. The flower's final transformation began accelerating. In Nexian space, the crystalline structures that formed their cities began to resonate at frequencies that disrupted their fundamental molecular bonds. Valorian psychic networks, already fragmented, experienced complete collapse as the plant's emanations shifted to wavelengths that induced cognitive dissonance rather than harmony. But the humans' revenge wasn't aimed at destruction. It was aimed at transformation. As the old power structures crumbled, hidden resistance cells emerged across both empires, offering guidance to populations suddenly freed from centralized control. The flowers hadn't just been weapons, they had been tools of liberation. We're not here to destroy you, Sarah announced to the billions of beings watching their societies transform. We're here to free you from the systems that made war between our peoples inevitable. The flowers aren't just breaking your empires, they're breaking the chains that bound you to them. In the chaos, something unexpected began to emerge. Nexian individuals, freed from the collective consciousness, started experiencing genuine individual thought for the first time in their species' history. Valorians, their overwhelming psychic connections reduced to more manageable levels, began developing new forms of communication and cooperation. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the rebuilt halls of Research Station Omega, now revealed as humanity's hidden command center. Around her, screens showed the continuing transformation of two civilizations. The flowers were now entering their final phase, their genetic codes stabilizing into forms that would help maintain the new balance rather than the old order. Humanity never sought to rule the galaxy, she said to the assembled representatives of both former empires who had gathered to negotiate a new future. We only wanted to ensure that no species could ever again build an empire on the suppression of diversity and free will. The station's botanical gardens still bloomed with Stella Aurora, but now the flowers were changing, their colors and patterns evolving to reflect the new harmony being born from the ashes of empire. In their crystalline structures and psychic resonances, they carried the promise of a different kind of civilization, one built not on control and uniformity, but on cooperation and diversity. Across the galaxy, gardens that had once been symbols of power became centers of healing and reconciliation. The quantum network hidden within the flowers now served to connect rather than control, allowing different species and cultures to communicate and trade as equals. This was always humanity's gift. Sarah concluded, watching as former enemies began the long process of building a new galactic society. Not the power to destroy empires, but the wisdom to transform them. In trying to defeat us, you gave us the perfect tool to save you from yourselves. And so, in gardens throughout the galaxy, humanity's greatest victory bloomed not with the thunder of warships or the flash of energy weapons, but with the quiet opening of flowers that had carried within them the seeds of revolution, rebirth, and hope for a future where no empire could ever again threaten the fundamental right of all beings to choose their own path among the stars.